I'm really excited, really energized. I know a lot of people have done some hard work leading up to this weekend, so we really appreciate that. I'll actually just go ahead and ask, please raise your hand if you were on the prep team call. Awesome. Thank you all for being on the prep team call. The prep team put together the consensus queue that will be following this weekend. How many people worked on language between last month and this month? Tyler in the back, Debbie. Centers and licensing, thank you all for that. We're looking forward to seeing all the hard work that you put together so we can move forward pretty quickly on those, hopefully. All right, I'll also ask if anyone wants to share any thoughts or feelings this morning. I know we usually do this just on the second day, but now that we're on February, second to last month, I wanted to see if anyone wanted to share anything. If not, I will share that someone from our parent group, Kevin, was nominated as an unsung hero this month. So congratulations to Kevin. Thank you for your work and advocating on behalf of children. Very exciting. Okay, we'll jump in. If anyone wants to share anything before we get fully into negotiation, feel free to jump in anytime. So Lori, if you could advance. We'll do our regular intro slides to give you an overview of where we are and what we're doing. So we'll start with current status, which is very exciting. Hallie's going to walk us through the thermometers that are very full. We'll go over any additional public comments that you guys have received, and then talk about this weekend and then our agenda for March. And then we have protocol review on here, and that's really to look through our code of conduct again, reminders on that. So Hallie, again, will give us updates on where we are.
All right, so great job, you guys. 87% of the WAC that we have has reached some level of consensus, so big round of applause there. So we have 86 sections that have reached full consensus, so that's consensus on the language and the weights, and then 15 sections where there's partial consensus. So a lot of those, well, all of them are either in our queue for this weekend or in the TA resolution queue that is on your table. And so that's where some part of the section has reached consensus either on the language and or weights, but it's not the full section yet. But great job, 87%, that's a lot of work that you guys have done, so you should feel very proud. So this slide just shows you, really in this month, everything that was tabled or that we, had tabled to February is back on the table, so it's back in our queue. So there you can see our 86 sections that have reached consensus, and we have 29 sections that are now in queue, either in the large group or for TA resolution. So within those 29, on the next slide, you'll see that the 15 that have reached some level of consensus are those two columns on the right-hand side, where there are either 3 or fewer subsections that need to come to consensus, or we just need consensus on the weights. So that's pretty encouraging. And then on the left-hand side, we have 2 sections that are coming up for large group consensus today and tomorrow that have not come to the large group before. So that's pretty positive that we only have 2 that are coming up for the very first time. And then we have 12 sections that are coming back that had either been tabled, sent to the Dell Tech writers, and are now coming back for consensus in the large group. So you can see of those 29, we have our 15 that had reached partial consensus and our 14 that are up for consensus, either for the first time or coming back after being tabled from our work in the summer and fall. So our public comment portals are still open and available, so we just had this slide as a reminder if there's any final comments as we're wrapping up this process, that those can still be submitted, and those will be included in our public comment summaries and debriefs. So those inboxes are there for you. And then just as a brief summary of some of the public comments that we have received from the last month, we had 9 new comments come in about professional development, and I just wanted to highlight those because that's where we're starting today, is over professional development. And so really the comments that came in between last month and this month really had to do with immunizations, which is section 120 that's coming up, and the connection between section 120 and section 205. So there were some comments that came up that said, you know, these two sections have a lot of related language. Where is the best place for that language to be? And then there were also some questions that were submitted that really were just seeking clarification. And so that's good that people are reading what we have worked on as a group, and they're really just asking some questions, looking for clarification about some of our intention or how this would play out. We've received some other comments. You can see there a lot around environment, that health practice section, which is section 205, and then some additional comments about nurse consultants. And then I have a comment down here on the bottom that if you're reading through that PDF or the Excel workbook that has all of the public comments in it, you might start to say, ooh, these are looking a little repetitive. I'm seeing some multiple comments that are the same comment. That is not an accident. So really here just highlighting that we have groups of people who are in our community who are submitting comments either through multiple channels, so sending those emails in and then also submitting comments through the portal, or they're working, you know, as a larger group and they're all submitting similar comments. So I just wanted to point that out, that that's not a mistake if you're seeing multiple comments that look very, very similar. Those are actually individual, unique comments that are being compiled.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. So when we have reached consensus on something like the nurse consultant piece, and then there's this huge outcry from the community, what happens to that? Is that going to be reevaluated in a year? Are we going to reopen that section because of the draw to that? Just curious what that means.
Yeah. So I would defer that question to Dell. Or Lauren.
So you will recall that as you've been negotiating, we keep referring to this final review that's coming up. So between February and March, we're going to ask you to be looking at all the sections that you've been reaching consensus on, making sure that your opinion hasn't changed. If it has, then you flag those, and we'll open them back up in March for further discussion.
All right, I'm going to hand oh, we have another question? Oh, all the links. Sure. I'm going to pass the microphone back to Tina, and she's going to walk us through our agenda for this weekend, moving forward.
All right, so I'll talk about this weekend. I'm glad that we talked about how in March, between February and March, Lori mentioned that we'll ask you all to do a full review. So it's even more important that we get through our consensus queue this weekend so you all have the chance to see everything as a whole compiled together. So you have a lot of stuff in front of you on your desks and your tables. I'll walk you through that really quick to help orient you. So per usual, we have an agenda. You'll notice a few changes to this agenda that are a little different from usual. So right before lunch today, we'll hear from Angela and Luba about the standards alignment implementation. So we'll get started with some negotiation on 0-100 and professional development, so this will align well with the topic you're already talking about. So updates from them will happen right before lunch, and then we'll have our regular consensus taking and breaks and public comment at 5. Then tomorrow, we'll continue consensus taking. We're hoping that by lunch, you'll finish all of professional development. So there's 0-100, and there's 2 that haven't actually come to full group at all. At that point, we'll take a break and have an update from PCG and Sonia about weight balancing. We did some pre-work about the goals that you've asked for to prepare for weight balancing, so we want to give you some updates on what that looks like. All right, so you can read the rest of the agenda about our timing. Then you also have this horizontal queue, consensus queue. So this is the queue based on the prep team's order that they proposed. So again, you'll see initially we'll start off with the 3 that have not reached consensus yet and have not come to the full group. And then we'll move into the ones that have partial consensus. So either the language or the weight was tabled, or there was some type of research or Deltec right that you needed. So this table is more detailed than usual, so you can get a sense of exactly how many touches it's had, where we are. So hopefully this will be helpful in following along. If you don't want to, we'll read it to you as we come to each one. The very back, it's the last page, is actually the TA resolution queue. So we'll start that TA resolution queue as soon as we start with number 4. So if you didn't follow that, that's okay. We'll keep you posted as we go, and we'll let you know where we are along the way. So that's if you need it, if you want it, follow along there. You also have a giant packet on your desk. It's either rubber banded or in a clip. There's about 2 or 3 on each of the groups, and that is the current master track change version of the WAC. So that's there for you if you want a paper copy instead of just electronic. And the last thing that you should have on your desk is 1 or 2 copies of the parking lot list, so you can see that we've been keeping track of the parking lot items along the way starting in May. So that's all the paper that's on your desk right now, and we'll feed you other documents as they're necessary. Okay, so then, as I mentioned in March, we're hoping that we don't have hopefully any, or may just have a few that we have to come back to full group and measure consensus on. At that point, between February and March, you'll have a chance to do full reviews, so you'll let us know what other items you want to come up that weekend. And of course, that includes definitions that you've flagged. I want to point out that it's just a Saturday and Sunday, so we'll start probably around 10 on Saturday to account for travel, and then we'll end at noon, so it is a short weekend. So I want you to keep that in mind as we're going through this weekend, that yes, we do have an additional weekend, but it is shorter than usual, so it's really important that we keep pace. I also want to remind you that the prep team was very strategic about how they set up this queue, and we did say, we all agreed on the prep team call that if any group or multiple groups feel like we're at a point where we're kind of getting stuck, that we'll move forward and then come back to it later this weekend, knowing that we have a very long queue. So I ask you all to help us keep each other accountable and just know when we need a break, when we need to take a step away and then come back later. Okay, so that's this weekend, and then March. We'll jump in quickly to the protocol review. We always put this up here because we want to consistently remind you that why we're here, right? The center of it all is to make sure we're here for child development, health, and safety. Of course, the code of conduct is something that you all agree to together. I want to bring this up again, especially as we go into some of the tabled items. If you think about why we tabled them, a lot of them were ones that are close to your heart, ones that people have strong feelings about. So I want to remind you to keep these code of conduct items in mind, both in the room, on breaks, and between the weekend. Be respectful of each other's opinions and feelings about the highly emotional content that we will be touching. So if anyone, again, feels like anyone's broken the code of conduct, please feel free to come to us, any of us as facilitators, and we'll help you address that. We also ask that you hold each other accountable, of course, as well. Okay, and of course, we're always thinking about cultural competency, and we're always thinking about our orange. Again, this orange we always flash in front of you right before we get started, but if you'll bear with me, I'm going to give you guys a quick analogy. Just with the 3 of us as a team, we were trying to decide where to eat. So our favorite part about traveling is that we get to experience different areas and eat whatever is great in that town. And so recently we were all talking, trying to figure out where to go. Zane says, I want a burger and beer. And Hallie's like, I don't want to go there. And then I said, well, I just want something healthy. And then we had a hard time picking, right? Because we didn't say, well, Zane, what exactly did you want? Like, maybe there are restaurants that also serve something that's healthy. And then we asked Hallie, like, well, why did you just flat out say no to Zane? And she's like, because I'm a vegetarian. Typically places that have burgers and beer don't serve really good vegetarian options except for, you know, a frozen veggie patty and sides. And so we even just noticed within our interactions, wow, if we had just asked each other, we could have solved a lot of problems with something that is as simple as where do we eat. Where we did go, by the way, is Fair Start. I don't know if you guys are familiar, if you're in, either if you live in the area or you've eaten out here. But I want to put a plug out there. It's a nonprofit that works with people who, any walks of life that have kind of been down on life, and they help train them in the culinary field. So either it's basic prep, like line staff, or actual people. They also help train them for 16 to 20 weeks. They remind me, they gave us this spiel yesterday. And so every Thursday they had guest chef night, and they graduate the folks that have gone through the program. It's also a life skills program. So if anyone's looking for somewhere to eat, it's healthy. They have vegetarian options. They also have beer and sometimes burgers. So anyways, that's my plug for them. It was a great time. But just thinking about, you know, this is an easy graphic to look at and be like, of course I get it. But it really is something that can apply really simply to our negotiation, and sometimes things that we think are very obvious why someone's saying what they're saying. But just a reminder to ask the questions and to ask yourself the question so you can express it. Thanks for bearing with me on that analogy. Okay, so as a reminder, call to actions. You can always go to TA resolution. I think we want to be careful here because of course, a lot of these have already been in TA resolution, so we'll ask each team lead to make sure that you're comfortable with that. And then don't forget, we can always sidebar and have a team caucus. I also want to be careful on those table regulations. If we table it, we should be very specific on when we're tabling it, because we, of course, need to get to March and the full review. So I think we will need to be very careful about why you're tabling it, and then we'll come together and make decisions. And we'll keep you updated as we go on what that queue looks like, so it doesn't get too long. Okay, that is it for the intro. Anything come up for anyone as we were chatting you want to share? Okay. So before we go into our regular team caucus, what we'll do is have an overview of what we reached consensus on 0 to 100. It took a lot of hard work. We want to recognize that hard work. As you know, it took over 2 days, and we want to refresh you. So Hallie's going to do an overview of 0 to 100, then we'll move into a team caucus, and then we'll start with assistant teachers.
Okay, so as Lori is slowly scrolling through section 100, just a reminder, we did make a lot of progress. So we reached consensus on the language and weights for subsection 1. So if we scroll down to that, we see that that is about our family home, early learning program licensees. And what I wanted to point out was for number 1, we came to consensus on the weights. There were a couple of weights that were tabled, but we wanted to use the weights on 1 as a model for the weights on some of the other roles. So as we scroll through these, you'll see that we have that documented, that the weights for number 3 and subsection 4 are also mirroring the weights in subsection 1. So that was our family home licensees, and you can see all that previous work that's crossed out. We reached consensus on subsection 2. We reached consensus on subsection 3, which was about our center directors and our assistant directors. And so as you're flipping through the pages on your desktop or on your computer, you can see there that the notes are that the language reached consensus, and you can see that the weights are to be updated to mirror subsection 1, so we wanted to carry that consistent weighting throughout this section. We reached consensus on subsection 4, which is our center program supervisors. We reached consensus on subsection 5, which was lead teachers. And again, with those notes that the weighting is going to be mirrored. We last time skipped assistant teachers, and so that's where we're actually going to be starting today, is on assistant teachers. And we had some proposed language that came from centers and the licensing team that we're going to look at today. Subsection 7 was about aides. And then last time we left off on volunteers, and so we have after we go through assistant teachers, we'll come back to volunteers. And I did receive language from centers and licensing that we're going to include in this draft. So you might not see it up on the screen right now, and it's not in your packet, but we had some additional proposed language to help resolve some of our concerns in that subsection. And then we'll move on to subsection 9, which is our substitutes. So in section 100, I mean, you can see that we only have 3 subsections left: our assistant teachers, our volunteers, and our substitutes. So we are on that downhill slope, hopefully, of making a lot of progress this morning for section 100. As we move into our team caucus, I would say we can scroll back up to assistant teachers. We did have some additional proposed language there that we'll put up on the screen, but that's where we're going to get started this morning. So we want to respect your time to get to talk as teams. So we're going to move into our team caucus time, and we'll give you guys 15 minutes to discuss, and then we'll come back together. So the language that's on the screen is proposed language that came from centers and licensing for you to be able to review and compare against what is in the master track changes paper copy that you have on your tables. So this is proposed language that we're going to start with today that they worked on between the 2 meetings. Okay, that was our team caucus time. We are going to come back together and we're going to focus on assistant teachers. Before we read it, we had a couple of teams that asked if centers might explain some of the changes or why they made some of these proposed changes. So we'll pass the mic to them.
Okay, so after working a lot on this last negotiation, we wanted to make sure that we were getting to what our end goal was and what licensing's, you know, the end goal of what we both, how we saw this working. And their focus was, from my perspective, I don't want to speak for you guys, but what we were trying to meet was their focus of having a lead teacher assigned to a classroom who is cultivating curriculum, making sure that the quality, having the training, all of those things are being maintained in every classroom. And so we wanted to honor that, and we agree completely, because that is how you maintain a high quality program, is having a great teacher in each classroom. And so adding yes, there is a lead teacher who is primarily responsible for the care of the same group of children a majority of their day, to get that consistency and very high quality for all the kids in the program. But then also for continuity of care, there will be times that lead teachers have to be gone, they're sick, they have vacations, they can't work 14 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. And so having assistant teachers who are trained by us and who we know can maintain the classroom up to 2 weeks if there is some sort of a medical need or a vacation, and then also provide afternoon and evening support to that classroom, again, while the structure and integrity of the classroom is being maintained by a lead teacher. So that is what we submitted here, and then we took out the 50% because while we were seeing, that the goal was to put out there that the lead teacher was the person who was going to be there most of the time, but that 50%, because of the different time frames that different programs operate under, that didn't seem like it would be as workable for us, so we submitted the 2 weeks. And the assistant teacher also, because they're in our program, acts as a really amazing sub because they know our policies, procedures, child allergies, who can pick up, how you act when you have someone arrive who you don't know, things like that, medications, all kinds of things are knowledge that assistant teachers in our program have. So them stepping into the role of a lead temporarily makes a lot more sense to us.
Okay, great. Were there any additional questions or clarifications that were needed? Okay, then I will read this one from the top, and we will get ready to take consensus. So number 6 says, assistant teachers work to assist a lead teacher or licensee in a center or family home early learning program. Assistant teachers assist lead teachers or family home licensees to provide instructional support to children and implement developmentally appropriate programs. A, assistant teachers must meet the following qualifications: be at least 18 years old, have a high school diploma or equivalent, and assistant teachers must have a minimum of an ECE initial certificate or equivalent as approved and verified in the Electronic Workforce Registry by the department within 5 years of the date this section becomes effective, or from being employed or promoted to this position at any licensed early learning program. Assistant teachers must have their professional development progress documented annually, complete the applicable pre-service requirements and training pursuant to WAC 17300, 105, 106, and 108, and assistant teachers may work alone with children with regular scheduled and documented oversight and on-the-job classroom training from the classroom's assigned lead teacher, who is primarily responsible for the care of the same group of children for the majority of the day. A, for continuity of care, assistant teachers can act as a substitute lead teacher up to 2 weeks. If longer than 2 weeks, the center must notify Dell with a plan to manage the classroom, and that is a wait of 3. Okay. I call to take consensus on the language of subsection 6. Okay, so let's take consensus on the language for subsection 6. I am looking at centers and I see 5s. From licensing, I see 5s and a 3. From parents, do you want me to come back to you? Okay, we'll come back to the parents. From Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s. From Family Home, I am seeing 3s all the way around the table. And we come back to our parents. Do you need a minute or? Okay, so I'm seeing 5s and a 3. Do you want a minute to discuss? Okay, so let's put 1 minute on the clock for our parents to discuss, and then we'll continue our consensus.
We had in 5II where they made the new change where it says the substitute lead teachers if no longer, Instead of just the centers must notify, how about the provider? Because in case it works with home care.
So just right there, the provider must. Okay. Are you ready to take consensus on that one? Okay. So we'll see our consensus from the parents. On the language, I am seeing 5s all the way around the table. So we have consensus on the language, but we did have some 3s, and so we'll document their concerns. We had some concerns from Family Home and also from licensing. Do you want to document any concerns? Either one.
We're ready with our standard professional development equivalencies to be addressed. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you. We appreciate all the work that
Yeah.
happened here.
That was great. All right, thank you.
My concern was just the 2-week time period. I'm not comfortable with it, but I can live with it.
Okay, great. All right, and so number 6 was a weight of 3. So we'll take consensus on a weight of 3. So from Family Home, I am seeing 4s and a couple of 5s. From Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s. From parents, I am seeing 5s all the way around the table. From licensing, okay, they need a 1-minute team caucus. So we'll put 1 minute on the clock. We're ready whenever you are. All right, so licensing consensus.
We're blocking.
They're blocking consensus on the weight of 3. And then from centers, we want to. Oh, that was our time. So consensus is blocked on a weight of 3. Licensing, let's document your concerns unless you have a proposed solution.
We would propose a 4, which is what Family Home is. It allows for, we just have a real concern that somebody could have repeated problems with staffing that they're not addressing, and we don't have any recourse here other than technical assistance. So we would like to bump it to a 4.
Okay. From team leads, would you like a 2-minute team caucus to discuss a weight of 4, and then we can take consensus on a weight of 4, or are we ready to take consensus on a weight of 4? I'm going to give us 1 minute to discuss this because I can hear some conversation happening. So let's put 1 minute on the clock to discuss a weight of 4, and then we'll take consensus. Okay, that was our 1 minute team caucus, so we're going to take consensus on a weight of 4. All right, so consensus on a weight of 4 from centers. I am seeing 5s all the way around the table from licensing. I see 5s all the way around the table from parents. I am seeing 5s from Head Start ECAP. I am seeing 5s, and from Family Home, I am seeing a blocked consensus. So let's document your concerns.
Concerns are the capacity and ability to get all of this training within 5 years. We have experienced this in the past and had many challenges to making it happen. I do not think that being fined or other things address that. I also think that at a weight of 3, when that repeatedly happens and there's not a plan, technical assistance is really appropriate for this.
So to keep us moving forward, I am either going to propose that we table this weight or that we have a sidebar conversation between Family Home and licensing. Team leads from those teams? A sidebar? Okay. Licensing? Okay. How long would you like to sidebar? 2 minutes? All right, let's put a 2-minute sidebar between Family Home and licensing. That was our 2-minute sidebar. Do you need additional time? 1 more minute? All right, we'll put 1 more minute on our sidebar clock. right, that was our sidebar conversation time. Do we have a path moving forward?
I believe we can take consensus again as long as we include in the parking lot that it may be difficult for people to meet this within the 5 years, and so it's an implementation and it is a concern.
So we're going to document that on our parking lot list, and the call is to take consensus again at a weight of 4. So from family home, I am seeing 3s all the way around the table. From Head Start ECAP, I see 5s. From parents, I am seeing 5s and a 4. From licensing, I see all 5s. And from centers, okay, I'm seeing 3s and 5s with the note that they are demanding that equivalency table. All right, so we have consensus on number 6, you guys. Yay, we're making good progress. Are there any other concerns that we wanted to document from family home about the weight, or is our parking lot?
Parking lot and equivalency.
Okay,
We're really worried about the implementation and capacity of
Yeah.
state systems.
okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so we're gonna get ready to move on to volunteers, but facilitators have requested a 1-minute team caucus before we get started. So we're gonna put 1 minute on the clock and then we'll get started with volunteers.
Hey, everybody. We're not ready yet. So, we have some new proposed language for volunteers that's coming out that came through a collaboration between centers, licensing, and also a little bit of family homes. We are sending that out now as we speak, and we'll be going through that momentarily. Please hold. Okay, this may seem a little complicated, what we're about to go through here, but I want to start off with pointing out we have a few different colors here of language that was proposed, or the original language. Black is going to be the first set, the last round where we had it at. Green, is that Centers or Dell? Where did that specifically come from? Yeah, I was going to do that here. And go ahead, guys.
All right, fine, I'll do it. All right, so this really isn't final language, but basically what we were trying to convey is that the way that we see it, there are kind of different types of volunteers, and we think it's important to have a distinction between the different types of volunteers, namely those that are going to be routinely coming into the classroom, interacting with children, kind of helping on a kind of a more ongoing basis, and therefore you can have a level of expectation of those people that's maybe higher than somebody who is going to come in to do a presentation on maybe a cultural event, or maybe they're a dentist and they're coming in and they're talking in a circle with your kids once in a school year. It's not realistic for us to have the same expectations of those two distinct types of people. So we wanted to make sure that we're, one, keeping children safe, so that we do have expectations of volunteers that we are going to be using more routinely, and that that's really understood. There is also, so the green language that we have there, the first part of it, so there's the black language there. The right underneath it, the green, was actually what came from Tyler that got distributed in paper copy to everybody last time. It was an update to that definition. Then below that was kind of the general basic parts of volunteers. Then there's a blue section as you go down,
Could you
and
go down?
that actually came from Tyler, and we're not really 100% sure why that. Go a little down, yeah. We have questions for Tyler. We're not really following why that is necessary, but we do recall that was part of the small group, and the subsection I below that came out of that small group in response to that. Then below that you'll see the regular ongoing volunteer versus the occasional volunteer, and kind of thinking through the distinctions of those two different things. So that's our proposal.
Would licensing like to add anything to that? If not, I can jump right in here.
I think that we ended up on the same page under the occasional was where our concern had been, and I think that got corrected to cannot count in ratio. So yes, that is, we agreed with him.
Okay. We talked about subpart I here previously last time, so I don't know if family homes want to preface that at all before we read through here, but we are going to get a little qualifications from Tyler on this here in just a moment, but we're going to start with the top, not the black. Right now we're saying that's the old section. The new fancy version, right, exactly, Lori, right where you're at. We're going to start from there. So, if I can see it. Volunteer includes any person who provides labor or services to an early learning provider but is not compensated with employment or benefits. A volunteer must never have unsupervised access to a child unless the volunteer is the parent or guardian of that child. That needs to also be adjusted there. Or an authorized person pursuant to WAC 170-300-0345, subsection 1, part C. Unsupervised access, as used here, has the same meaning as WAC 170-300-0020. All volunteers 14 years or older, under 18. Dell is going to, once we find consensus on this, they'll be cleaning that up. Under 18, the volunteer must have a written parent or guardian permission, must never have unsupervised access to children except their own. Always must be under the continuous supervision of a lead teacher, program supervisor, center director, assistant teacher, or family home licensee. Volunteers 17 years old and younger must never count in staff-to-child ratio and must never be left alone with children, even if they meet the requirements of subsection 8B of this section. The question is there, where did this come from? I'll let Tyler respond to that momentarily. Subsection I, or subpart I, if a volunteer is a member of the family child care household and between 14 and 17 years old, they may count in the staff-to-child ratio if they meet the requirements of subsection 8B of this section. Regular ongoing volunteer can count in ratio, must have a background check, and complete the applicable pre-service requirements in training. Volunteers need background check, TB test, child abuse and neglect, emergency preparedness, safe sleep if an infant and toddler, and food handlers if serving food, and new staff orientation. Occasional volunteer, for example, parent on a field trip, special guest presentation, someone coming in to help with a cultural celebration, cannot count in ratio, does not need a background check, and does not need to complete pre-service requirements in training. From the top, I'll let anybody comment. Let's have a 1-minute caucus. Family Home gets first dibs on the first speaker. Okay, Family Home.
I think that our intent just wasn't quite captured in DI on page 30, and that is if a volunteer is a member of the family child care household between 14 and 17, they may count in staff-to-child ratio. And really, we just intended that to be if a volunteer in a family child care home. They don't need to be a member of the household. They might be one of your previous children or a high school student that's coming to do observations or a project for their class.
Right, I recall that, yeah.
Okay. So we would just propose striking is a member of the family child care household and changing it to if a volunteer in a family child care between 14 and 17, they may count in ratio if they meet the requirements of subsection 8B of this section.
Caucus for another minute. is between 14 and 17 years old. Yep. And you could take out "and" right there. Okay. Licensing.
Okay, licensing is thinking that a volunteer, if they meet all the requirements, can be counted in staff-to-child ratio, and it doesn't matter if they're 14 or 29, but those that are under 18 could never ever be left alone with children. They could count in child to staff, but they couldn't be left alone with children. And it wouldn't matter if you're in a family home or a center.
So Judy, are you saying that subsection I there can be eliminated entirely? Does it?
I'm
what
saying
you're
that
suggesting?
where it says volunteer 17 years old and younger must never count in staff-to-child ratio, we don't know why that's there. We don't
Okay.
think that is necessary. We just think the important part is if they're under 18, they must always be with somebody over 18 that's qualified. But if they meet requirements, they could count in child-to-staff ratio.
Family home, I'm sensing agreement there. Does that also mean that we can take out subsection I as well? Or is this language even necessary at all, given what Lori is highlighting up here with the green language? Okay. Deltec riders, is it something that can be removed? Given that this section is here. I'm going to give you all a minute to contemplate what you want to do. And also we can sidebar with Tyler. Tyler's going to sidebar with some folks, it looks like here. So please put a minute on the clock.
Hey.
Looks like we can. Does anybody need the rest of the time? Okay, well, it's already up. Go ahead, Judy.
Okay, so we think that you can take out that entire blue section
Family home?
as long as they meet the qualifications. We just need to make sure that we get that in there, that they, this is not well written at the moment, but we just need to make sure that they're getting the bloodborne pathogen, everything else, if they're gonna count in child to staff ratio. And that they are never unsupervised. We think that there might be a couple of things missing in what was just highlighted, and we would want to make sure that those met all of the pre-service qualifications.
And I think once this goes back for cleaning up with Deltec, oh, there we go. Thank you, Lori. Let's put another minute on the clock for everybody to let that sink in. Okie dokie. So, yep. You can delete that, I think, for now. And we can delete all that. Except the weight. Okay. All right, I'm going to start with, does anyone have any other commentary they want to have? Centers?
I recall there was discussion around the age 14 rather than 13, but we're still not totally clear why. Because conceivably, you could have a child who's been in your program up till age 12, and then they might be a staff member's child, and then during the summer the following year, they want to come and be a helper in the classroom. But they're not yet 14. So they're no longer welcome at the program when they're 13, but as soon as they turn 14, they can come back. So we're confused by that. And we do not want them in ratio at that age either.
So from Dell's perspective, that would require a change to a WAC that we are not currently negotiating, which is the background check WAC, which addresses 14-year-olds and does not address 13-year-olds. So that is part of our pushback on that, is that this group is not negotiating that WAC. Could it be put forth as a possibility to be considered? I think probably, but I would not feel comfortable negotiating that in this group.
I do want to comment. We did in the small group come to a tentative consensus on language around including 13-year-olds in a certain way, and I do not recall off the top of my head what that was. Was that in the old language, Lori? Could you know? Am I wrong? Am I? Okay. I just want to make sure. I couldn't recall.
It is essential that we have a place for 13-year-olds. So we would appreciate that going also to the parking lot. And I can just give
Lori, you can scroll up. We did include it here.
may not count in staff-to-child ratios. So we think that that's perfect as long as there's a place for them there that they can volunteer and never be left unsupervised, of course. Because here's an example. I've had about 6 of my children over the many, many years of doing this work that have volunteered when they were too old to attend and then became part-time employees or worked through college or whatever. And most recently had a 4-year-old say to my 19-year-old after-school assistant, "Sarah, when I'm big like you and I work here, will you still be here?" So I think that it's an amazing opportunity to continue a passion for early learning and care and to give back to your community. So we want to make sure that that volunteers 13 and older can have a place there if it's appropriate and through an exception form or whatever we need to do, or encourage and through the parking lot law change, an RCW change.
Judy?
So we would agree that this needs to go in the parking lot and needs to be looked at. But again, it would conflict with another WAC that is currently in place. And if somebody were going to be coming into the facility on an ongoing basis, they're required by WAC to have a background, and our background WAC does not allow for 13-year-olds. So we absolutely hear what you're saying. We would love it to go in the parking lot. We would hope that Dell would address the issue, but I don't believe that we could negotiate it right now.
Sorry.
Hi, so we just had a question, which is about the these definitions of regular ongoing volunteer and occasional volunteer, which we're very happy with this whole section. But we're wondering, are those going into the WAC or are they going into the definitions?
Anybody want to take a shot at answering that? Centers say whack. Lights, both? Lori wants to make note
Yeah,
that.
I know. I mean, I'm asking about the section. I mean, yes, I get it. I'm very stressed, so.
So the definition of volunteer is in the section 0005, which contains all of the definitions. And you want words that are sprinkled throughout the different sections to actually be defined in one place, which would be 0005.
Well, let me clarify. Is there anything in here that conflicts with the definition, or are we going to update that definition?
Can we put a note to keep an eye on that? Would that work? All right. Okay. While Lori is making that note, Luba.
I'd like to follow up with Kitty's question, and also what Judy been saying. So the definition of volunteers belong also to the portable background check chapter. So it's not the child care licensing rules chapter, it's a portable background check rules chapter. And I believe it's what you mostly worry about. So just keep in mind that those two chapters will need to be coordinated. They will need to have one definition. So keep it in mind.
Thank you, Luba.
It's not a part of this preview because we're not discussing a portable background check chapter, and we're not responsible for discussing it.
All right.
So yes, so think about how, if you would like to influence it, then think about how to do it. That's why I'm bringing this information to your attention.
So are you saying that that even if we change it here in the WAC, we still wouldn't have changed it in the portable background check section, and so we would be out of alignment with that?
I'm seeing head nods. Yes.
That would be correct.
So let me ask Dell then, what is the process for changing that WAC?
It is why I'm suggesting that we put it in the parking lot so that Dell is aware that there could be a conflict or a concern and that they look at pulling the two together. Because if we have a recommendation that we cannot fully negotiate because of another WAC, we want to call that out with our recommendation and have Dell look at it at the same time they look at the other WAC.
And we specifically noted that now in the parking lot list as well. Tyler?
Okay, so just to add to Judy and Luba's point a little bit, as currently written and proposed here, our use and definition of volunteer matches the background check chapter. They work together as written. Now, if we change them dramatically in this chapter, there is the risk of conflicting with the background check chapter. Currently, that's not an issue, and that's sort of what I've been keeping an eye on. But think about that, because the background check chapter is outside the scope of what we have authority to negotiate here, that if we change our use and our definition of what it means to volunteer too much, it may conflict. I don't personally think that we've done anything to risk that yet, but it's a possibility, and I think that's part of where the confusion is coming from. So right now, they work together.
I'm okay. So
just to help us move along here, I'm going to let you all know that you all know the Department of Early Learning is being abolished at the end of June, and everything transfers over to the new Department of Children, Youth and Families. The background check rules that exist today are being worked on collaboratively with Children's Administration and Department of Early Learning right now. So the Department of Children, Youth, and Families will be adopting rules, background check rules, after it comes into being. And so you'll have a chance to weigh in that rulemaking process on this issue. So I just want to throw that out to you so that we don't continue to spin our wheels here and think about what we want to do around background checks and this, because you'll have an opportunity to comment or participate in the development of those background check rules for DCYF.
Thank you, Lori. So we have a regularly scheduled break right now. I'm going to see if we feel like we can try measuring consensus just on the language before we go on this break. How does everybody feel about that? Okay. Well, Lori, could you scroll down to the bottom there so we can capture occasional volunteer as well? Does not count in ratio, does not need a background check, and does not need to complete pre-service requirements of training. Okay. I'm going to ask for consensus on language, starting with family homes. Okay, I see some fours, all fours in family homes. Parents, see all threes noted. Licensing, mostly fives. I see 1 4. Centers, I see all threes. We'll come back to you as well. Head Start is all fives. All right. I'm going to ask family homes to make their case, and then centers to make their... Wait. Parents, I'm sorry. Parents had threes. Parents, go ahead.
That's messed up. I'm just...
Bobby.
Okay, so we are just, it could just be the way that it's put up here or the way that we're reading it, but it just doesn't really look like a WAC. And so the wording, while we agree with the intent and it seems like everything's good, it's not formatted in a way that we can confidently say, like, yes, we're 100% behind this. So we're just a little concerned that in the translation from these note style paragraphs to the WAC, things could get turned around. So we're concerned for that.
Noted, thank you.
And the 13-year-old thing, but we recognize that, you know, there's stuff going on there, but that also concerns us. So those are our two concerns.
Much appreciated. Centers?
Really honestly echoing what you just said, talking about wanting to make sure that we have a place for our 13-year-olds who want to participate. So we do need to relate back to the other WAC, even if it's not in the purview of this group. That is something that needs to happen so that we are being consistent. And then just for clarification as well, these were notes that we then sent out and we're waiting for some feedback back about the confusion about the 17-year-old, and it wasn't actually our intent that this would be WAC language, but it was put up there as so sorry, it's a little rough, but it was a way for us to convey the ideas.
Noted. Okay. 10-minute break, guys. We'll come back and take consensus on the weight on here. Okay, everybody, that is the end of our 10-minute break. Please find your seats. Apparently, I lied. No, they're not listening, are they? I lied a little bit ago. We are not going to be taking the weight on volunteer consensus just yet. We have a scheduled presentation from Ms. Abrams. They're, no, people are not back yet. We'll give it another just momentary. I'm going to get up here and go ahead and transition the microphone to Angela.
You guys here? You back? You ready? Huh? They're convening. They said go for it. I'm supposed to bring you guys together. All right. So what I wanted to do is to spend a couple of times with you to share some thoughts and gather your feedback. My experience in all of this for myself has been that we know that there's a really strong need to spend a lot of time both thinking through this from a community lens, a systems lens, and a lot of areas, when I say this, I mean the professional development work, and wanting to make sure that we have a space to do that. I know that I've casually mentioned some of these things that I'm going to share with you today to some of you individually, but I wanted to put it out there in a more formal structure and kind of cement some of these ideas and gather your feedback at the beginning. When we're going about our work around professional development, the word equivalence, I fully understand the concerns related to what does equivalent mean. It's really hard to process that when we're still working on that. I'm thinking about these things when I'm listening to you work through those, and we've kind of stayed on the fence about, is that built into the WAC or is it about implementation? And we really feel that it's about implementation, and we also believe that we need to gather a lot of voices to do a good job with implementation. At the same time that we're wanting to kind of hone in on what that word means, I'm also, pushing back a little bit and saying, can we have some time so we do it right? Is this resonating with people? Okay. My ask of you today is to listen to an idea, to let me know if this is something that feels like would be a good idea to you guys, and kind of, yay or nay. And if it is, then we can talk about what that might look like. So my thought is that many of you have been so intimately engaged in this work. When I use the word equivalence, or how it ties to something, or what does it mean to be an equivalent, how does it tie to training, or what if I go to training, does that mean I need to reach that equivalent? If I say that to a general group, they're not going to know what I mean, but you guys do, because you're deeply engaged. And given the conversation, what that could play out to be. So what I was thinking that it would be a great idea to do is to extend some of you, and I was thinking maybe about a couple of people, 2 people per table potentially, I'm just throwing out a number, you guys can give me your thoughts, to pull together some sort of work group around getting that done. I know that we've received a lot of feedback. Some I've asked specifically to some of you, hey, tell me what you think. Some have offered it through the negotiation process. But we want to be able to do is to not only bridge in the ideas from the community who may be hearing this for the first time, but what's really more important is those of you who are in this room today who have been engaged in this for almost the last year. And I feel like now that we're getting close to wrapping up our consensus process, we're ready internally at Dell to begin kind of thinking about these next steps, because we have kind of the bandwidth and the timing and the knowledge of what's being reaching consensus to be able to do that. So if that is something we would like to do, it'd be an advisory group, especially focused on equivalence in the beginning, because that's kind of one of the key pieces that needs to happen first. And then we can continue to explore how does the advisory group evolve to continue to support other areas. When we look at the timeline, we know that we need to work on the equivalence piece first, because to be honest, that's probably going to take the more time to work out, because if we're going to tie to a competency review, which is what we've been talking about, that's going to take time. The training is usually about topics. We're going to want to bring in national experts. We're going to think about what competencies that touches. We're going to need to think about what is existing in the field. Even though that also sounds like a big lift, time-wise, it's not as intense. So we can kind of stagger our energy to make sure that we're giving those pieces there. I'm seeing some nods. Can I get some input from you guys on if so far that feels like it may be a good idea? Okay. And then I think with the crew, whoever this becomes, whatever we choose to call ourselves as we continue with this work and discussion moving forward, you guys can decide, is there anything missing? Is there anyone missing? Are there any peoples missing? But I feel like through the negotiated rulemaking process, and maybe you've had hindsights given this process, what you think, and I'd be totally open into hearing that. So it's not an extension necessarily directly of NRM. That process will wrap. It's kind of like a professional development implementation of the outcomes of the work. So if you can think about that, and if this is still something you would like to do, maybe over lunch or whatever your time is, if there are 2 people, let's just say, from the table, and maybe some of you are more engaged, and maybe one table's less than another says, you know, I really see 3 experts that we need. 2 is an arbitrary number, but what we would like to do is to not have, you know, 50 people, and I don't mean that, you know, to be rude and not appreciate your time. It's really hard to advance the work. And then also in our first stages of the conversation, we can keep in mind how do we not only keep the NRN group informed, but others in the community, because the same energy that we have here and the angst that we have here about what does this mean, you know your peers and all of our communities feel the same. And the intention is never to express that, but there's always so much work that needs to happen at the forefront to be able to get to a place of providing clarity. So is enough time to kind of take a sign up at the end of the day today, enough time for you guys to think about that? And then we can think about, you know, steps. I want to acknowledge that it is another time commitment, and it will take work and energy, and I know you've given so much, and we appreciate that, but I also believe that without this group's intimate participation, that the outcome won't be what we want it to be without the people and the voices in this room. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't engage the other people who are external to this group as well, but you have a different lens and experience than most in this situation. Any thoughts, Brenda? Well, I probably can't like host you up in a hotel every time. What normally happens? Sure. So let me describe a little bit of what the normal process is for any work group, and some of you have been a part of it. Usually at the beginning kickoff stages, it does require some in-person time. People need to see each other, we need to whiteboard things, we need to write things, we need to kind of think together and process things together. A lot of work that happens in between can be done independently or in small groups or webinars, because instead of just like reading and responding in the way we are here, where you need to kind of be together and doing that, a lot of it will be like drafting something, drafting ideas, pulling things together, creating a crosswalk that shows these things together, or something along those lines that doesn't require in-person. What normally happens with many groups related to work similar to this is a meeting maybe once, in this case, we don't want to go too slow, so maybe a meeting every 6 weeks or so that may be in person, or a longer webinar, but then we would have it probably at least bi-weekly contact just to make sure we're keeping things along. And I would totally be responsive to what the group's needs and availability are, but that's just kind of a general understanding. Any other questions? Yeah.
Happy that you're doing this. This is really exciting that this process is starting. We have volunteers at our table already. I also wanted to request, and I've talked to a couple other people at Dell, including Frank Ordway, that Dell provide sooner rather than later some communication about the fact that this will be happening, because there's a lot of uncertainty out in the world and in the legislature, and that's where it starts to affect me.
Yeah, and you know, maybe that's a part of this group's charge as well. I have been talking to Genevieve, you know, about this and how can we create a resource, and maybe it's the announcement of this group and kind of what are some of the things that we know so far, what is this group charged to do, what are, you know, the inputs that we're going to get from community. Could that be a starting point?
So honestly, I don't think that this group has to work on it. I think that this is like a Dell Communications update about where are we on professional development in general and this step that Dell is taking on. Because I think that the fact that we are all going to be working together on these equivalencies is super exciting and not well known.
Yeah.
And I don't think that
the legislature is particularly up to date on the
Yeah.
fact that negotiated rulemaking is happening, for example. I think that most of them have no idea what that is. So I would like just a one-pager that can reassure the field and the legislature about all of the work that we've done and the success that we've had around coming to agreement, and that there are next steps that are going to be done in concert with the field.
Sure. No, that sounds good. Thank you. Anyone else have thoughts or suggestions? All right. Well, I am going to pass over to Luba, and I want to thank you again for your time and energy and commitment for ongoing time and energy. Thanks.
And thinking about broader implementation, definitely professional development is a very hot topic that we've been discussing since June. At the same time, there are other pieces of their chapter that also will need to be implemented. So I'm more than sure that you're wondering how all of you may continue to be a part of this process as negotiated rulemaking will conclude in March, and at the same time implementation will start, how you can continue to be part of it. So many of you are aware, and some of you may not, that from the beginning of the alignment, standards alignment process, Dell created an advisory committee group. And this advisory committee group been meeting through the webinars and face-to-face bi-monthly. So we would like to continue with that, and we're inviting all of you to become a part of it. So it will give you a chance to provide input. It will give you a chance to, if there are other work groups that we will need to develop on other topics, not only professional development, we definitely need to consider it. So all of this feedback and input could be provided through the advisory group. It's an open door group. If you will not be able to participate yourself, but you know someone who will be interested and would like to, please share this information with others, because it's an open door work group. Anyone can chime into a webinar, can come to the department to participate in face-to-face meeting. So Rachel Campbell is outside. She is taking the personal information from anyone who would like to be included into the listserv for the advisory committee. So the advisory committee webinar is taking place next Friday, because we used to have for 2 years advisory committee. Now we're asking all our members, would you interested to continue to participate? And we're asking you, would you like to join? So please give your information or someone's information to Rachel, so she will include you in the listserv, so you will be able to be part of the next Friday advisory committee webinar and meeting, because we're also meeting at Dell. And you will hear about negotiated rulemaking, where we are right now. It's one of the big agenda items. And you also will hear around the whole standards alignment progression, where ECAP is with their work, where early achievers is with their work, how the whole progression is moving. And also you will be able to provide your feedback. What is next on implementation? What do we need to consider? Okay? So please see Rachel, see Angela, to give us a chance to be in contact with you if you would like to stay involved.
I have a question, could we invite or ask if there are other, could we invite or inform other providers in
Yes.
that like we're not part of negotiated rulemaking,
Yes.
but it's still been very much interested in
Yes.
what we're
Yeah.
doing? Okay.
Anyone who is interested to be a part of the advisory committee can join.
Okay.
Because through the 2 years, there have been people who will chime in for some period of time and will not be active for another period of time. And then as we will start working on some topic that interests them, we'll get back to it. So it's come and go type of open door committee. So anytime anyone who is interested could be on the webinar, because we are interested as many people to be a part of the process as possible.
I have a follow-up question. So if people are not here in the room, how do they get a hold of Rachel to say that they're interested?
So we count on you that you will be able to provide them with contact information, Rachel's contact information, so she will include them to the listserv.
Thank you.
So I hope that all of you do have by now Rachel's contact information. Okay. Thank you. I don't want to stay between you and lunch.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes. As Luba said, we don't want to stand between you and lunch, but what we have now on the table is to reach consensus on the weight for volunteers. Does someone want to go ahead and throw that out? Yes, where we left off was the weight for volunteers. So I don't think we're going to be able to reach full consensus on it in 4 minutes before you eat, but if someone could throw out a potential weight, we can think about that over lunch.
Dell would propose a weight of 4 to be consistent with the other qualified people. We would propose a 4.
All right, so licensing is proposing a 4. Does anyone want to go ahead and... So why don't we hear any initial reactions, and we'll have lunch and measure consensus when we get back. Oh, people are ready? Are you ready? Much better, okay. Let's measure consensus on weight of 4 for volunteers. Centers, all 5s. Licensing, 5s. Parents, we have 5s and 2 4s. Is it 2 4s? Heads are ECAP, all 5s, and family homes, 2 4s, and the rest 3s. All right, so we'll hear your concerns.
I would just like to note that the same that we did earlier with the 4, and we had that sidebar, is that if it's a 4, that if a provider is making progress towards what those requirements are for a volunteer, that, you know, that's taken into account.
Okay, thank you. So we've noted that concern, and we'll also add that to the parking lot, so we have that in both places. Awesome, nice job. Volunteers reached consensus. Great, so we can be rewarded by lunch, and I hear it's a potato bar, baked potato bar. So enjoy, we'll come back together in an hour.